I've tried to get Maine from being the highest or worst tax state in the country down to 15th or 16th over the last 8 years. It hasn't been easy. I've made a lot of tough decisions. I've irritated an awful lot of people, but I think we want to get into a situation where we're not having a tax thing hanging around our neck.
When you started, you had a much higher budget deficit.
Right.
How did you get it lower? What was the most challenging cut to make?
Well, I think my business experience, running a small family business, restaurant business, third generation, so you had to balance budgets, you had to meet payroll, and you had to, at the same time, compete in a very competitive environment. So I think I knew that there was a lot of untapped innovations, there was a lot of duplication of bureaucracies and effort. You know, in the restaurant business, my dad always used to say when I left the kitchen and went out front, don't come back empty-handed. I think in Maine, when you talk to farmers, you talk to fishermen, they're doing things and they're getting by, and they're the most innovative, creative people in stretching dollars. And they pride themselves on that. I don't think we've really tapped that kind of well in terms of the government and what the government can do and should be doing. And it could be a lot more efficient, a lot more flexible, and they can be a lot more responsive with fewer resources and people and bureaucracies work. So what I did was consolidate departments and agencies, the biggest ones, not the smallest ones. And I basically told them we're not raising taxes. We're going to provide for our kids, protect our natural resources, but we're going to figure this out. And it hasn't been easy.
But consolidate is just a fancy word for cutting jobs or laying people off.
But I think you're recognizing that those administrative jobs you can't afford. You can't afford the wages, you can't afford the benefits. Yeah, they are cuts and layoffs. But what are you doing to help bring in 300 or 400 other jobs or 800 jobs we brought in?
In the private sector.
Right.
Well, there are a lot of problems that almost seem like inherent contradictions to solve at the same time.
Yeah.
So how do you prioritize that? Getting the budget deficit lower, meanwhile creating jobs. When getting the budget deficit lower, you have to cut jobs in some cases.
Yeah, we had to balance the budget. But you know, there's a lot of innovation out there. And there's a lot of ingenuity, you know, and I said to people who say, why do you say you're not going to raise taxes, you know, isn't that caving into the conservatives? I said, no, it isn't. I says, we're just practicing our ingenuity, our innovation, our ability to think outside of the box. Isn't it a lot more challenging to figure this out without raising taxes than it is with raising taxes?
So what can Washington learn from fishermen? It sounds like they need to save for a rainy day.
I think they need to go out with one of our lobstermen out there, see what they go through, see how they stretch dollars, see how they're efficient, see how they're caring of our environment and resources, and all they want to do is provide for their families, and they want to make sure that they can go and do their work the next day. And these fishermen will tell you, you know, what Washington should be doing, establishing priorities, getting back to what's essential, and working together and talking with each other, not just throwing mud balls at each other.
We're in crisis mode. We, the states, are not in pre-crisis at all. We're right now cutting essential services to people that we have always provided historically, but we're without options. The banks, unfortunately, didn't see it coming and failed. We see what's required of us. We're stepping up to it. We're going to be competitive internationally. We know that's what's at stake.
You talked about being in crisis mode, though.
Yeah.
How did we get here?
We were one of the last to be affected by the Wall Street failures because we had such a great thing going with our trade. But it then hit us and hit us hard. And so we're looking at a significant deficit for our next 2-year budget. And it has hurt our community banks, which are the lifeblood for our small businesses. And we're hurting, obviously, in our trade because we are seeing no consumers buying those products that are coming into our ports right now.
Do the states need a bailout?
You know, I think Congress may have to take a closer look at it. We don't have the ability to borrow. We can't run a deficit. So we're managing our way through this recession. But we're hurting the national economy because it has been so devastating to us. But still, over the next couple of years, without some help, the states are going to hurt the national recovery. We're in tough economic times, and 1 in 3 jobs in Washington State are directly or indirectly related to trade. We have a reputation internationally for being high innovation, high quality, whether it's wine or potatoes or cherries or airplanes or software or coffee like Starbucks.
Unemployment, though, in the state of Washington is 8.9%, which
has been, unfortunately, for 3 months.
Lower than the national average, but still incredibly high.
Still incredibly high for us. and just kind of sitting there. So we're not gaining, which has been frustrating over the course of the last 3 months. We want to see an uptick. And unfortunately, I think we would have this last time, but for state and local government layoffs. So we are, again, seeing some positive signs in the private sector of jobs, but we're not seeing enough in the public sector of stopping the layoffs.
And foreclosures, 17th highest for foreclosures in the state of Washington.
And we were really late to get in that. Really late. The reason we were is because we didn't really have the gimmicks. So those foreclosures in our state are really not gimmicks. They're simply unemployment. They're people who've lost their job and can't afford to make their mortgage payment.
So are we turning around there, or is the worst still to come?
Oh, no, I think all of my Council of Economic Advisors tell me we've hit bottom, but we're not gaining. We're struggling. There's no question about it. We've been trying to telegraph this message to Congress. I have high hopes for us as a country, but I'll tell you, the next couple of years are going to be tough.
This has been a tough time for all of the states, certainly for Tennessee, but it's also really been a time of opportunity for us with some major investments.
The state of Tennessee has brought in $4 billion in CapEx in the last 7 years. Almost 3,000 companies, from Volkswagen to semiconductor companies.
Right.
How did you do that?
When the economy gets soft like it has, a state like Tennessee becomes even more attractive, I think, as a place to locate business.
Have businesses responded more favorably to you as the founder of Health America Corp?
Well, I think businesses have responded well, and not because I don't think because I'm a former CEO, but because we've conducted ourselves in a business-like way.
But you're a former CEO, so if you're talking to the CEO of a Volkswagen,
right,
for example, asking them to bring business to the state,
right,
those conversations are different.
Well, they're different, although, you know, the company I was CEO of was a nice company with a lot of employees, but it was not Volkswagen by a long shot. I don't think it's so much two CEO buddies talking as it is just someone who's been there, who's made some of these decisions about where you put investments. I think they find it refreshing to find a politician who's interested in those things.
And our viewers, investors, businessmen and women, are interested in the idea that the states could be the next entity to fail. They're worried about that. If states, bigger states like California or Michigan fail, do they bring down states like Tennessee with them?
It cannot be good if California, Michigan, and New York, and New Jersey, even some of these states that you've heard about having significant issues, that can't possibly be a good thing for the country or a good thing for the economy. If a California were to fail, I mean, that would be like a couple of those big investment banks failing. It's not no telling where that stops, and we need to figure out how to make sure that doesn't happen.
Is there a palpable sense that the states could fail when you're meeting with governors across the country?
I don't think anyone thinks in terms of failure because they sort of can't imagine it happening, and I think they always think Uncle Sam will somehow step in and, you know, fix it all up.
Help is arriving.
I think there's a lot of feeling that there's going to have to be some more stimulus or something like that. I mean, a lot of states, we didn't do it here, but an awful lot of states took that money and treated it as continuing money, not as a one-time help. So there's actually a lot of states coming this January have a cliff that they've got to navigate. And I really think the critical time for the states is going to be the first quarter of this coming year. That's the thing that's going to be difficult for them to get through, because the ones that haven't cut their budgets but have filled them in with stimulus money, that money disappears on January 1st, and there's going to be some dislocation. You're going to see some problems. I think that as long as investors in bonds, for example, are willing to look on a state-by-state basis and not lump all states into some category, they can find great bargains in there. We just, in the middle of this whole thing, had our AAA rating restored, which we'd lost a decade ago. I think in part because of the way we handled this. I just tell people in the state here that in business, you don't earn your pay in the good years, you earn it in the tough ones.
For more on Governor Bredesen's efforts and to see how your state stacks up against Tennessee, you can check out our website, cnbc.com. There's a special page there where you find articles, videos, and slideshows.